territory was a peaceful territory where different peoples from all over came and hunted peacefully. The idea then is keep the dish clean. And frankly, we folks that have come here from away, settlers, have not done a great job of keeping the dish clean. We're also part of another wampum belt agreement. This is the two-row wampum. And the idea of that agreement is that we and the indigenous, when I say we, I'm a settler. So you're not all settlers, but when I say we, I mean people that are settlers like me. We follow the river of life in our ship. The indigenous folks follow the river of life in their canoe. And the two-row wampum agreement says we will not interfere with each other's steering. And we all know full well that we have done a lot of interference. And you guys, I'm sure, know about a lot of these things that we've done to indigenous folks over the years. So we have not done a good job of keeping the environment clear and clean. We have not done a very good job of allowing others to pursue their direction in life without our interference. And I think we all have to think about that and try to do a much better job in the future. One of the examples of our interference with indigenous folks is what Trish Mills, who's going to be our speaker, is going to talk about tonight, and that has to do with the RCMP and the federal government trying to help a pipeline company put a natural gas pipeline, fracked natural gas pipeline, through indigenous territory that is unceded territory, has never been given up to the federal government. So they're essentially trespassing to try to get this pipeline through. So I'm going to introduce Trish. I'm going to also mention, though, that we have this clipboard. We're going to pass this around. Please have a look if you're interested in being in touch. Please put your name and your email address clearly printed, and then you can check off which groups you would like your email address to be shared with. There are a few check marks here. You can pick and choose whatever you'd like. So I'll start it right here, and it will be wandering around. And in the meantime, I'll turn it over to Trish.
Holy crap, full room, amazing. Thank you all for coming out. As Jim said, my name is Trish. I also position myself as a settler and a guest on this territory. I'm here presenting basically as a settler because settlers are being asked to do this work with other settlers. So they're being asked to encourage other folks to take action, to create pressure, and things like that. And also, I have a relationship with some of the land and territory out there with people who remain on the front lines, and this is like a small way to try and honor those relationships. I just recently returned, and so it's like really close to my heart. So I just jumped into trying to like get people mobilized and working towards helping folks out there, supporting folks out there. That said, I'm not Unist'ot'en. I don't represent any individual, like Unist'ot'en individuals' views, or clan, or house, or anything. I am just a settler who's like absorbed things, who has like relationships, who's taken pieces and put it all together into this. Yeah, and
Does that mean you weren't born here?
No. So I use the word settler to describe anyone who is not indigenous to these lands. And by lands, I mean Turtle Island. So it doesn't matter if you've settled here in this generation or you were the first settlers. I would view folks as being settlers. So unless you're indigenous in this room, then I would kind of like embrace you in that category of settlers. And I mean, maybe a little more complicated, and also like, just to add nuances, this is also close to my heart in a more like political way. I actually have distant indigenous ancestry from Chagayenda and from Onondaga-Mekong. And the assimilation process has been very successful on that part of my family. It's very disconnected. And so I just know a little bit of like what it's like to lose, or that like interference to like what that interference looks like generations later. Again, based on that ancestry, I don't identify as indigenous. I've lost that, I'm a settler, I would encourage you to frame me within that as well. It's a weird position to like with power lines in these spaces. But it does maybe explain a little more of like why I feel connected to this issue in general. Well, now I will move into things. Can folks hear me? Pretty okay? Yeah. Awesome. Cool. So this presentation tonight, we're chatting about, or opening the evening up about, or talking about what's going on out at Unist'ot'en. We're talking about CGL, about police, and basically how folks here can kind of like plug in and step up, and what that looks like in a number of kind of ways. I'm going to start with a video. It's very loud. And this is basically just a recap of kind of a lot of things that have happened in the last year or so. So it should kind of get you a little bit up to date.
At this moment, everyone should be aware of what is happening at Unist'ot'en. We are witnessing the criminalization of indigenous sovereignty and the continued degradation of Unist'ot'en territories. Yet, the Unist'ot'en continue to uphold their laws and livelihoods, as they have for thousands of years. Just to be clear, I do not belong to the Unist'ot'en, or even the Wet'suwet'en as a whole. I do not speak on their behalf. I'm just another person who has recognized the importance of these events and their implications for the rest of Canada. For a little context, I'll share a brief history of everything leading up to this point. The Wet'suwet'en Nation is composed of 5 clans: the Gilsadu, the Big Frog Clan, the Lexiu, the Little Frog Clan, the Gidimt'en, the Wolf Clan, the Leksamshu, the Fireweed Clan, and the Tsayu, the Beaver Clan. Within each clan are houses that independently manage their yinta, or territory, through their respective hereditary chiefs. The Unist'ot'en are a house belonging to the Gilsadu clan, or the Big Frog Clan. Under Wet'suwet'en law, the hereditary chiefs are the only authority that can sanction development on Wet'suwet'en territory. On multiple occasions, all 5 clans of the Wet'suwet'en Nation have rejected Coastal GasLink's proposed pipeline.
Can you help us understand, sir, the distinction here between the Wet'suwet'en elected band council and hereditary chiefs of the Wet'suwet'en clans? I understand that the council is on board with the pipeline, but the chiefs oppose it.
I will try to do so in the face of a lot of confusion and misinformation that has been provided. The Wet'suwet'en operate on a traditional system with respect to their unextinguished Aboriginal title to their lands, including the lands in question here. Fast forwarding to 21 years ago in 1997, the Supreme Court of Canada recognized that system.
On the House Chief and also the Nicole case. All those cases we won.
The issue for the company and for the government of British Columbia and Canada is that they need to address Aboriginal title, which has never been settled in British Columbia.
We told them earlier how we looked after our land and who are the true caretakers of the land. And yet, the governments and the industry are still dancing around that.
The Supreme Court of Canada made no final determination, but it did recognize that the title holding system is the hereditary chiefs. People talk about it being complicated. It is not complicated.
It is a little complicated, but this is what you need to know. In short, both Wet'suwet'en and Canadian law recognize the hereditary chiefs as the rightful decision makers on Wet'suwet'en land. Their rights and title have never been extinguished, nor surrendered through treaty. By all means, they are sovereign people. But as for the band councils,
They deal with the question of on the reserve, water, sewage, those other issues.
at this point, you should at least know more than the guys carrying the guns.
I think my understanding of the argument, and it's a basic understanding, is that the First Nations in that territory had tenure over that particular area of land, and they've never ever relinquished control of that land.
It is pretty clear that Sergeant Rose has no idea that he's on the land he is talking about, as the Wet'suwet'en were plaintiffs in the case he's referring to.
They've always turned away outsiders. There's never been anybody committed into that territory. So because of that long-term history and record of not permitting outsiders into that territory, the court said, true, you never ceded that territory.
Let's go back a little further to the Indian Act of 1876, which combined numerous pre-existing colonial policies aimed at eradicating indigenous cultures and governments. The act was designed to remove indigenous people from the land, put them on reserves, replace their governments with the dependent land council model, and to assimilate them into Canada. All of this was done to facilitate colonial settlement and resource extraction. In the 1880s, the act was amended to criminalize all involvement in traditional governance systems through the banning of the potlatch. All matters of ceremonial and cultural life were also made criminal, such as the Sundance in the Plains. Any form of gathering not sanctioned by Canada was essentially forced underground. And all of this was enforced by the RCMP, who helped oversee Canada's assimilatory policies. Hereditary governments in the Northwest did not sit idly during this time and quickly contested these policies within Canadian courts. As a result of persistent political organizing and efforts to address issues of territorial authority, the Indian Act was amended again in 1927, making it illegal for Indigenous peoples to raise legal funds, hire lawyers, or seek legal counsel regarding land claims or Aboriginal title. Keep in mind, all of this took place in conjunction with the Indian residential schools, deadly foreign disease epidemics, and intense discrimination from settlers and their governments. The worst aspects of these policies would not be removed until 1951, yet the Indian Act still remains to this day. In 1997, over 100 years after the introduction of the Indian Act, and despite the best efforts of British Columbia and Canada to state the contrary, the highest court in Canada determined that Wet'suwet'en title to their lands had never been extinguished by British Columbia, and that the hereditary chiefs are the rightful decision makers on their respective territories.
The province is the one that needs to prove that how this is their jurisdiction.
Obviously, it's not an ideal situation, but we have to remember that it's 100 years ago, if the government decided, well, the railway's going here, nobody would consult the government to just do this. That is not the way we do things anymore. It's not the way we should do things anymore. But at the same time, we're also a country of the rule of law, and the courts weigh in and say, that we need to get things done. We need to move forward. We also have to abide by that.
Shut up and sit down.